gay. No. You're gay! You're...
LGBT representation is a movement in media and art that has been increasingly important over the years. It encompasses all of the media we consume and can drastically change society's opinions on this community, their lives, and their struggles. Representation can be commonly misunderstood. People can mistake it for something more immature or downplay it for something that it isn't. For example,
speaking of that, can anyone tell me what LGBT representation is?
I think Rainbow Dash is LGBT.
Nah, you wrong. Rainbow Dash isn't gay, you dumbass. Rainbow Dash likes boys. Always has
Rainbow
liked
Dash.
boys.
No, Rainbow Dash is girl kissy. Girl kissy, she loves.
Class.
Nothing.
Bro, it doesn't even matter. The studio just cuts their scenes for international releases anyway.
You're fucking depressing, dude.
Well, I'm very glad that everyone asked. So
No, we didn't.
today
None of us did. None of us
Me
did.
searching
None
for
of
who
us
asked.
Today I'm gonna teach.
Yeah.
Today I'm gonna
No.
teach you all for the next 30 minutes. For the
Oh,
next 30 minutes. For the next 30 minutes, we're gonna learn about what LGBT representation is gonna be.
I hear a debate a lot of the time about what true representation is supposed to be, what people want, or how they feel like it should be. I hear the debate that it shouldn't be crammed down people's throats to get a point across, and I also hear the point that we still don't have enough. I also hear people view representation as unnecessary, and that it isn't needed in today's standards. But representation is not a debate. LGBT stories are protective, and censoring their narratives and their issues is a direct attack on the community as a whole. I personally believe that LGBT representation, as all representation, is very important because it helps an audience see themselves in somebody else's shoes. Representation in itself is very important so you can see yourself in what you watch. You can place yourself as that character or feel the way they feel and have your emotions and inner battles displayed in your favorite piece of media. The truth to the matter is finding the split between representation and what makes it important, and I think that's a conversation that's very necessary. To me, I feel like representation is absolutely necessary because it helps me feel seen and have all sides of a spectrum be heard as a bisexual man myself.
You bisexual man!
What? No, I'm bisexual.
No!
Representation comes in many shapes and forms, and it can be packaged in many ways. Gay representation isn't going, oh my god, there's a gay person, look right there, or... I guess it can be, but for now, I'm gonna speak on several forms of representation that I believe are notable and what they each do and how they represent things differently. They all include spoilers and will be kind of long. If you don't want to hear this, skip to this timestamp to where I do a speed run of examples of representation instead. Let's talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once. Not only is it one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, but it also features one of my favorite subliminal versions of representation. Everything Everywhere All at Once is a movie about multiversal travel at face value, but beyond those doors, it's about family, love, and acceptance. One of these acceptances is it sneaks in a great statement of queer identity. The daughter of the protagonist of the film, named Joy, has a girlfriend. She is presumably gay and is the antagonist for a majority of the film, yet her sexuality is not a forefront of her character, only at a subtle manner for a few scenes. The fact that she's gay isn't broadcasted or made the face of the film. It's sprinkled in as one of the many reasons why her and her mother have a disconnect. In the beginning of the film, our protagonist, Evelyn, misgenders her daughter's girlfriend and refers to her as a he, and belittles her, telling her she's lucky her mother is, quote, open to her dating a girl. When Joy goes to introduce her girlfriend to her grandfather, her mother just refers to her partner as her, quote, good friend. But by the end of the film, Evelyn faces her father, telling him that is Joy's girlfriend, wishing for him to accept her as her own. Although it wasn't enough for Joy, and she wished to be let go from the family. For her to truly forgive her mother, it took much more than acceptance, but for her mother to truly cherish her presence in her life. This is followed after several trials and tribulations of learning what love, family, and acceptance mean, as Evelyn accepts her daughter for her full, authentic self in every definition of the word. The film ends with Joy and her girlfriend working together to help their family finish their taxes, and they express nothing short of love, which is something they never have before. This is one of my favorite examples of representation, as not only does it present queer identity in the station of generational family trauma, but it's also not a defining point of her character. That isn't the reasoning for her issues or her being the proposed, quote, antagonist for half the film. It's just her. It's a part of her whole identity. That was subliminal, but also not, depending on how you interpret that piece of media. As there are many levels of representation, my next personal favorite is Ian Gallagher and Mickey Milkovich from Shameless. Also, discretion, this show is full of drugs, sex, and other things that I can't mention, so if you're under 18, I really don't advise it. Anyway, Shameless is a show about a family from Southside Chicago that face economic issues, addiction, and pretty much the main two things, bad parenting and mental health. They live in the ghetto, the characters make mistakes, and fuck up all of their relationships. The entire show at its core is about working with what you have and trying to get out of the gutter. Ian Gallagher and Mickey Milkovich meet in season 1, where Mickey wants to beat the shit out of Ian, but Ian constantly avoids him to avoid getting his ass beat, obviously. Ian then goes to Mickey's house to get revenge, but instead of getting revenge, they become really, really good friends. Hey, you wanna be my friend? Oh my god, I would love to be your friend, yes! Throughout this entire show, for 11 seasons, Ian and Mickey have trifles in their relationship. Mickey's closeted until season 4, they have breakups, Mickey goes to jail several times, Ian goes to jail, they struggle with vulnerability and, well, truly understanding each other. Mickey has been raised as a thug with a shitty, terrible, abusive father who would rather die than have a gay son, yet throughout the entire show, both characters develop, not just in themselves, but in their relationship, and throughout time they become more thorough and develop better understandings of what a good relationship is and how to treat each other with full care, as, if we're honest, neither parties had the best idols when it came to what a good relationship was. But near the end of the show, in season 10, they get married, and the show writes it as a victory lap for the entire family. After a decade of trouble, both parties trying to figure themselves out and learning how to take care of not only themselves but also each other at the same time, and a shred of homophobia, with Mickey's father trying to kill him over the wedding, they embrace each other and accept each other's hand in marriage for the 10th season finale. Mickey overcomes his own trifles, with not only him, but his father, and accepts himself in front of everyone as who he is, and they are able to celebrate happily ever after. It's not only a celebration of their relationship and character, but a celebration for the entire family and show of Shameless, that despite all of their hardships, they could still find true happiness. Shameless is probably my favorite representation of an MLM relationship because of how many levels it showcases. Not only does it tackle homophobia and the attempt of alienation at some points, but their relationship is also very casual throughout the entire show. It isn't treated differently from other characters' relationships from a writing standpoint, and both characters are entirely of their own. It's void of stereotypes and is probably the most ghetto and masculine example of representation that I've watched. Okay, let's talk about Asteroid City. Asteroid City is a movie about a play that's a metaphor for grief, loss, and love. In the movie, we follow a director and its crew that are practicing and performing a play as it goes on. In the film, we have the characters Jones Hall and Conrad Earp. This is a very low-key example of representation because it never highlights their sexuality, aka its complete normalization in the role. In the play itself, Jones Hall plays Augie. Jones comes to the playwright, feeding him a spoon of ice cream and asking him more details on how to play his character in the play. During the making of this play, he and the playwright fall in love with each other through a simple scene of a zoom out. "You're perfect," they say, as they kiss, and the camera just slowly zooms out. Yet, 6 months into the play, Conrad, aka the playwright, tragically dies. This doesn't stop the play though, as it just keeps going. Jones, playing Augie, now has the role of mourning over his dead wife in the play, but as the play goes on, his dialogue and his emotions speak that he's truly mourning the loss of his real lover Conrad, as he puts those emotions into his character. He can't actually express his feelings outside of the character because of the fact that the play takes place in the 1950s and he has a role to fill. He can't express grief over his lost lover Conrad, nor find comfort in the character as the film goes on. Outside of the play, he's told to use his pain, and he does, using the pain of Conrad further to make the scenes more believable, leaving him burning his hand in a scene. Near the end of the play, Jones breaks character and walks up to the director, where he tells him that the character's pain has become his own, and he can always feel his heart being broken. This leads to my favorite scene of the movie, the balcony scene. Jones wishes for closure from his lover Conrad, and he's met face to face with an actress who was a part of a scene that was written by Conrad, yet the scene was cut. The actress played Augie's wife, and the turn of dialogue between the two provides insight on a scene from the early part of the play that was deleted. Jones' character, Augie, can have one last conversation with his wife as they recreate the scene, and Jones himself can have one last conversation with his lost lover Conrad, who wrote it. This to me is also an excellent example of representation, as the entire movie is a metaphor for grief. Jones can't express his grief for the loss of his partner because of the time period, displaying it through a character, which might be the only time the movie does a metaphor for prejudice, but besides that, it's normalized from a writer's perspective, and it's a story about how many experience loss, but how Jones himself lost the one he loves, and had to settle that grief through the insight of the play. These three are some of my favorite and most notable examples of live-action representation for same-sex relationships. From generational trauma to seasons of slow burn to a story of grief, it shows that there's a place for any type of sexuality in any kind of media setting. It doesn't need to be a forefront to be a good story, but it's representation nonetheless. I mean, there's also other stellar examples of representation, like so. Welcome to the lightning round. We're gonna just shoot out a bunch of examples of representation that I like and that I've seen, and we're just gonna go through them. Let's go. BoJack Horseman has an asexual character named Todd Chavez. Todd has an arc in the show where he discovers his own sexuality, never being a defining trait of his character, and seeks out an asexual dating app where he goes and meets other people like his own. He finds a support group, makes friends through it, and thrives. Good rep. The Harley Quinn show, or most Harley Quinn media, has Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy in a relationship. The show never actually highlights the fact that they're a minority taboo, and it's just a really good relationship. This also ties into the Batman animated series where they would flirt all the time, but nothing could happen because it took place back then. Good rep. Schitt's Creek features two characters, David and Patrick, who are simply everyday characters a part of this sitcom. They're just two guys who fall in love and thrive in a relationship, and there's never a mention of homophobia or unliking. Good rep. Night in the Woods has a plethora of LGBT characters. I love this game. For a prime example, Greg and Angus are the only openly gay couple in their town, May is pan, Jackie is a trans woman, and so forth. Great game and good rep. I know it's seen as a shame to mention, but shows like Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel are also excellent LGBT rep in my eyes because most of the characters in both shows are on the spectrum in some way. MLM, WLW, transgender, and further. You have characters that are LGBT that are also really shitty people, and those who are just very casual and sweet. I think a good part of representation is having LGBT characters who are shitty people. Offhandish, rude, mean, or absolute perverts, and worse. Unfortunately, a part of representation is having every party represented, no matter how bad. So I believe that having people of every side of the spectrum playing every kind of role is good. Good rep. All of these are examples to me of good representation and what representation is supposed to be. Before I move on to my next point, I wanted to highlight what I believe is an excellent piece of transgender representation as well. This isn't a game or a movie or a show, but a book named The Vanishing Half. I'm not going to dive too much into detail, but the book revolves around the question of your identity and the way it conducts and changes throughout your life. The journey of self-discovery and the shaping of identity, and it features an excellent example of a relationship that also features a character named Reese, who battles with gender dysphoria and coming into his identity. It's another raw form of representation that showcases every instance of what you can go through and many ways you can prevail as a person. I believe that is what a good type of representation can do. Make you question, make you feel it, and put your heart into things you wouldn't know otherwise, which is why I watched Moonlight. Moonlight is a movie that is notorious for being a culmination of its kind, a work of art in its genre, and touched a lot of people's hearts. Yet, I never took it upon myself to watch it until now. Moonlight, to me, is one great example of how you balance normalization and specialization. Moonlight in itself is not only one of the best examples of representation I've ever seen, it's also one of the most devastatingly beautiful love stories I've seen in media. It's a story about a boy who had a troubled upbringing. In his adolescence, he battled with prejudice and being antagonized by everyone around him. He didn't have a strong figure to lift him up or help comfort him from the storm. His only comfort is the person who fuels his mother's addiction and his one friend. In his teenagehood, he battles with the hardships of the family, abandonment of his loved ones, and self-denial. His sadness is represented by the wish to drown his sorrows in the ocean. His one friend, the one who understands him the most, says, just roll out into the water, right? Roll out into the water just like all these other people trying to drown their own sorrow. This friend, in the midst of his sorrow, shows our main character love for the first time. And after feeling this love as a first instance, within the whisper of the passing of a day, he experiences betrayal from this friend, from the one who showed him love for the first time when no one else ever has. This brings us to modern day, the character's adulthood, where he lives far away from home. He's shadowed, he's broken, he's put up a facade to protect himself from ever being vulnerable ever again. Until that day, he receives a call from the same man who is the only one who ever understood him, the only one to ever show him love, the only one to let him feel like himself. The entire point of the third act is it lets these two characters rekindle their relationships with people. They never changed. At their core, at their soul, they remained exactly the same. It was the same people, but with different faces, different bodies, and different lives. Yet somehow their connection remained forever the same. The two characters, after many moments of silence, tension that is unnamed, and moments defined by music, find themselves face to face with the same exact feeling. It's mutual, but both feel like they can't voice it, until our main character, for the first time in his life, speaks it, accepting himself in his full truth. Our main character, for the first time in a decade, allows himself to feel comfortable and vulnerable for the second time in his life, years after exempting his heart from ever beating that same rhythm. The third act concludes with our main character laying his head on the others as they lay on the same beach that they shared in the act before. The same shared ocean that was our metaphor for his feelings of sorrow, except this time the ocean was a metaphor for his love. He's finally allowed himself to drift, slowly, comfortably, and follow along with the water as he lies with his other half in the moonlight. This, to me, is one of the most stellar forms of representation that can be spoken. Moonlight takes the task of highlighting issues that are not only faced from prejudice, but the issues that come along with identity and your surroundings. The main character lives a life that is void of sympathy, and this film showcases an understanding of isolation. To me, it's not only an understanding of isolation, but also a very clear, empathetic art piece that shows compassion, disparity, and spectrum. With this, it is still the devastatingly beautiful love story I called it before. The third act in itself tells tension and lets you know exactly how these people are feeling without a word of dialogue. It shows you with a shot, a melody, or a mutual smile of comfort. This love feels earned, and the feelings aren't forced. It's a romance in every sentiment of the word, while also being a statement on oppression and a showcase of isolation. To sum it up and put it into a few sentences, Moonlight is a beautiful example of great LGBT representation that tackles both sides of specialization and normalization. It gives us a love story that truly progresses between two characters and shows a good understanding. You could see it from the perspective of a romance, a tragedy, or individual progression through youth. The split between normalizing LGBT audiences and also giving them a platform for their voice are both very important, and there is a truth that they can both coexist in the same world. You can have stories about prejudice that people face and have that be the storyline, but you can also have characters who are gay who never speak about it once. There has to be a balance and a mutual respect in a given media for there to be a true split, to have the normalization of LGBTQ stories and characters that are LGBTQ in stories. There's a vast difference between gay stories and stories that have gays, which is why I would like to compare Moonlight and Love, Simon. Love, Simon is a story about a closeted kid named Simon, and in this movie he struggles with the precedent of being gay and fights the stigma for him to be able to come out. I watched this movie when I was much younger and it helped me discover myself, but in modern day, I don't view it as a decent piece of LGBT representation. Yes, it features a gay character, and yes, it is a coming out story, so it is LGBT rep, but it's not one I am quite a fan of. Allow me to explain. In the film, Simon Spear is displayed as a quote normal kid. He comes from a normal suburban loving family. He's got a great group of friends, and he doesn't have any physical expression that just screams something different than the men's aisle at American Eagle. I mean, hell, his opening line is, "I'm just like you. I have a perfectly normal life." His life is great in contrast to a character named Ethan, who is the only openly gay kid at his school. Ethan is gay, flamboyant, and embodies a lot of the stereotypes that are specifically put on a gay person. Very quickly in this movie, Ethan is faced with a slew of homophobia from his peers, and Simon, our protagonist, says, and I quote, "I wish Ethan wouldn't make it so easy for them," which, what? Simon and his anonymous lover are both afraid of being outed and are blackmailed to do it anyways. He sends an email on a school computer and another student discovers the emails and blackmails him to help this student get a girlfriend or else he'll out Simon on the school blog. Oh my god! This is a situation that is only happening because of the character's sexuality. His romance is used within comedic conventions to really showcase the queer experience, I guess, as they consistently put down the feminine character, Ethan, to put Simon on a pedestal to remind you how masculine and conforming his character is. In contrast, he isn't quite flawed or expressional besides that, and this film shows it. He doesn't feature any characteristics of someone who is actually queer or truly afraid of having her individuality shadowed. Simon faces a situation where he has to lie to his friends or be outed. This leads to emotional turmoil, and the narrative of our movie blames Simon for being blackmailed. And the lesson is that, quote, being outed is no big deal. Just come out. It's not a big deal, which is extremely harmful to audiences. It's basically inferring that coming out is not a big deal and that he's bad for lying to his friends. I don't think I need to explain any further why that's wrong. To me, Love, Simon tries to define itself as an expression of the queer experience, but waters everything down so a heteronormative audience can digest it. Was it a good step in representation for the main mainstream? Yes, in 2018, but I feel like as if it's aged like milk instead of a good glass of Cabernet. If you found solace or comfort in Love, Simon, I'm happy for you, truly. When I first watched it, I thought it was amazing, but in the times we have now, there are much better examples for you to see the colors that represent you on a big screen. Thus, we have our examples of good representation and one I personally deem not very good. Representation is not black and white, and it's necessary to have multiple sides. Someone who isn't able to be loud and proud about who they are can see themselves in a character where a character faces that struggle in their own story. Or representation that is normalized in a story can also represent someone who doesn't want to be put on a pedestal, where they also have these struggles but they're completely casual and it's never highlighted. Like, this character is gay but they just do normal day shit. They don't really mention it. Both parties are equally as valid and both parties should be represented. I myself used to believe that all types of rep should be absolutely normalized. I used to hold the torch in the belief that true representation meant your struggles are never talked about or highlighted and were just like everyone else. Like Love, Simon, for example. I didn't want stereotypes to be leaned into or oppression to be constantly highlighted. But as I've grown older, I've realized the true importance of the equality of representation. The slow burn romance with the small trials of prejudice and Shameless, the drastic change of time and hatred in Moonlight, the casual grief in Asteroid City, or the tragedy of self-discovery in The Vanishing Half. This is why normalization and specialization are equally as important. Characters can be a part of a community while it's not a forefront of their character and express themselves in any way. But characters can also be gay, trans, etc. and face issues in their storyline like prejudice. Putting sexuality on a pedestal and highlighting topics such as oppression, generational trauma, and grief are very important, and you can have that too. All types of representation are equally as important, as every person from that party deserves a voice. This is why I don't believe that we have too much representation or that it's being shoved down our throats. I don't think either is possible because if you ask me, we still don't have enough. We're in an era where we're getting more than ever and both sides are equally as important. Both sides should be spoken for. Every person has a different face or a color on a canvas. They express themselves differently and experience things differently, which is why every form of representation is just as majorly important as the last. You can love all things typically feminine or all things typically masculine, or both, or neither. You could be facing consistent issues, or be fully accepted, or the middle, or neither. You can wish to see yourself in the shoes of someone overcoming hatred, or you see yourself in the shoes of someone doing normal day shit, or the middle, or neither. And you can wish for any type of genre, or to be into any interest you wish for. Once all of those things are accomplished, and we are able to majorly acknowledge why it's important to see all of these things for ourselves, only then will we have truly reached true representation in both its specialized and normalized form. This is why LGBT representation, and truly all representation, are important.
Class, could someone tell me what LGBT...
Let go, Josatro!
God.
Anyone else?
I think Heavy from TF2 is pretty gay because if you look at him, he's kind of like a looks like a
more
bear.
like Walter White, because like if
I
you look at
think-
him and Jesse Pinkman, like they do pretty much everything together. They run this whole business.
But, y'all be forgetting
together.
that Gojo like spent his whole life.
And shit, like
Gojo got the eyes. Y'all know the
Army
eyes.
just feels